Hey, everybody, welcome to the Queen Comedy Podcast. It is James, and today I have a great guest for you guys. It's going to be amazing because I I know I've known of him via another person in Santa Barbara. So I know of him via Sam Bear, and we've had Sam Bear on the podcast, I think twice now, if I'm right. If I'm wrong, I'm
Nice.
sorry, Sam. I owe you another shot back on the podcast. She's amazing. But he is a psychiatrist by day and a stand-up comedian by night. He also is on a podcast with Sam Bear. I believe it's called Sam and Sam, and I forgot the rest of it. Sam something. And he'll
Yeah.
correct me in a minute.
Yeah, I'll correct you
But
in a minute. Don't worry.
okay, so please before so I don't lose him here, please welcome Sam Silverman. Sam, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. Having me. Yeah. I've known about your podcast for a while, and it was so awesome to be on a show with you the other day.
It
Really cool.
was it was so much fun. That was a fun crowd. It went well. That was a good. I wish I would. I'm mad at myself for not recording my set because I had a great set. It was a great room. The problem is that I've been to that club a few times and had bad rooms. So I was like, I'm not
Yeah.
going to worry about it. And then I was like, oh, dang. Of course, the time I decide not to do it is the time that I have a great crowd. So
Yeah. Great crowd, great lineup, top to bottom. It was awesome. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, when you have a good producer and a good booker and stuff, and Denise Carter's one of the best, when you
Yeah.
have someone like that around running things for you, then you're gonna have a great show. So that's good to
Totally.
go.
Totally. Love Denise.
Yeah. So okay, what's the podcast called? Because I know I just butchered that. What's
That's okay. We did just Sundays with Sam.
Sundays with
So
Sam? That's what it is.
yeah. And this is where we film it. We usually film it on the reverse here. Yeah. But right in this room. Yeah.
That's awesome. And yeah, because you both have this background of helping people with stuff too. So
Yeah.
you're a psychiatrist, which that's amazing. You're way smarter than most comedians. Why would you go into comedy? So I'm going to ask that in a minute, and you're going to have to give me an answer to that. And then you obviously are empathetic and caring. Again, another characteristic that a lot of comedians don't hold: very selfish and very self-centered and very egotistical and very probably had bad childhoods to the point where we go, I everyone look at me, let me laugh at me, love me,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. So it
Yeah,
doesn't seem like
validate
you
me
have any of
like I
those.
wasn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're all human, but I appreciate that.
So kind of give us let's first go to your origin story, how you became a comedian, how you started in comedy. I know some of your origin story via my friend Paul Moongene, so I know there's a little bit of that in there. But
Yeah,
other
well,
than that, just kind of give everybody your kind of origin story for comedy there.
yeah. So I've always been in the performing arts to some degree, whether it's theater, vocal, comedy, other just like random stuff. Never stand up, but other things there. And I think in medical school, I did a lot of singing. Starting in residency, I moved out to Southern California, and I I wasn't really getting a lot of that. My life opened up, started in third year a little bit more. I kept on saying I really wanted to do it. I had made some promises to my wife about getting in mics, doing certain things, never did it, never kept it. And then I had a best man speech and it killed. And she's like, that's it. I'm forcing your hand. I'm signing you up. And yeah, it worked out well with my timing. It was my last year of residency, so had a lot more time. And yeah, I she signed me up for a class with Paul, and the rest is history.
That's awesome. Yeah, Paul's amazing. He's one of my favorite people. So
Right.
that's great that that works out. He is also probably, whether you love it or hate it, I don't know how some people feel about this. He's very honest in his delivery of what you should be doing. And sometimes
Yeah.
it feels mean. Like I've had times where I've like left a meeting with him and been like, oh, he's mean. And then I realized like later on, like, no, he cares. Otherwise, he wouldn't have spent time with me. He wouldn't have talked to me. He wouldn't give me advice or whatever. And so that was my own insecurity, right? Letting
Yeah.
me be insecure and go, oh, he's mean. He doesn't care, like he just
Right.
wants to belittle me or whatever. That's not true. None of those things were actually true, but in my mind, because I was already down on myself, but I was taking that in internally and putting it out on him. So Paul, I
Yeah.
apologize for all those times I've ever been upset at you've never deserved it. You're such a good person. And yeah,
He
he's a good
he's
brother.
a teacher. He's used to constructive criticism and
Mhm.
feedback bouncing off the wrong way sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah.
But he's so good. Yeah. His philosophy towards so many different things is still at the top of my list with mics, with bringer shows, all sorts of stuff. So yeah,
I know. I always wanted to do a podcast with him. I always thought that he and I should do a podcast together. It just
yeah,
has never worked out. Really would love it because I think that there are some things that we agree on and some things we disagree on when it comes to stand up, and
yeah,
or even life. I think that might even be a good one too of life perception,
yeah,
because we're the same age. We are very different places in our lives, right? We are very
right.
different, doing very different things. So there's a lot of that. Now,
And yeah, you guys grew up together, right? Did you
no, no,
say
no,
that?
no,
No?
no, no, no,
Okay.
no,
No.
no. We
Okay.
only met each other in 2015 or 2016, somewhere around there.
Okay.
But
Okay. But you're just
we
real
came up,
tight.
yeah, we
Yeah.
came up in comedy at the same time. We were like coming up at the
Oh,
same time. So yeah, so
nice.
he's kind of always been there for me. How does it work for you being a psychiatrist and a comedian? Like, and do your patients know that you do comedy, or has that ever come up, or how does that work? Because that's got to be a little awkward sometimes.
It is a little awkward for sure. A lot of them at this point, no. And I occasionally I will tell people if I'm really trying to like get somebody to like instill some type of habit, routine, I know they're a creative person, I'll use my own comedy experience to kind of meet them where they are with that. And if I feel like comfortable giving them that information. But at this point, like you have clips go off on Instagram or YouTube or wherever else, patients end up finding you and figuring that out. You know, Santa Barbara is it's a city, but it's a small town. And so, you know, if I'm on a show in Santa Barbara, people may show up and see me and recognize me. Um, and you know, it's never gone really that poorly.
Right.
Um, you know, I'm pretty vulnerable about my own mental health in a lot of my acts. And so I think I could see a few people not being into it, but you know, I'm generally pretty open about that. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's pretty awesome. I mean, yeah, you have great stuff, and then you're talking about being a dad and stuff. So there's a lot of you peeling back the onion on stage, which
Yeah.
is hard. That I for a lot of comedians, getting to that vulnerable stuff is difficult. It took me a long time. I wanted to do like base level, easy jokes. Yeah,
Yeah.
kind of not Jerry Seinfeld esque, but in that way of just like I'm observing the world. You're
Hmm.
not going to learn about me, but you're going to get my point of view on how I observe the world, and that was my baseline for a while, and it
Right.
worked, but it was never. I never got that audience connection, and then I started going deeper and kind of talking about. I think I happened to get on stage one time, and I had to like run long, and so I started talking about something personal, and it got a different reaction. And keep in mind, if this wasn't a formed joke, it was just I needed to burn time
Yeah.
on stage. And then I made that connection with people, and they seemed to love that more than what I've been doing. And I was like, dude, do you know how hard I worked on these other jokes? And you're going to think
Yeah.
this is better? Like, it really like messed me up for a little while. And then Paul and my friend David Studebaker and a couple other people like, look, you got to go a little deeper. You've got to like mine who you are and bring out, talk about your family, talk about your kids,
Yeah.
talk about all those things that people can relate to, and talk like get in there. And that changed everything.
Totally. Totally. And I think, and that's a lot of why, you know, my jokes, I don't really tell jokes about my patients ever. And I'm very clear about that. A lot of people want me to because it seems like kind of that low-hanging observational fruit. But I think, yeah, the real, A, I don't feel comfortable with it, so I'm not going to get buy-in from the audience, even if I'm writing a good joke. But the other thing too is it's it's not personal enough. Any idiot can make a comment about mental illness from behind the scenes. I want to talk about what I see, what seems ridiculous in my own experience, all those different things. It's so much richer. It really is.
I like that. What now? When you started, you were going to Mike's. Were you going to Mike's in Santa Barbara? Were you driving all the way out to LA and stuff? How did that work for you?
I was still living I was living in LA. I was living right on the edge of LA County. So I was living like the furthest away up into like San Bernardino, Orange County, like Claremont, California, that area. And so
Okay.
yeah, like the actually the first show or the first class I took with Paul, the class was at the Flappers when they still had it in Claremont there, but we ended up doing the showcase in Burbank, and so just been going down there since. And so I was doing that for a year or so, and then moved up to Santa Barbara. And so then I usually just do mics in Santa Barbara. I'll come down for various shows in LA, depending on kind of who's reaching out, who's asking there. I don't do a lot of like reaching out for booking because with my life right now with medicine, I just I you know I don't need to fill my time, nor can I necessarily. So yeah, but that's kind of what I did there.
Now, are you looking to do the Ken Jeong model of like doing stand up or whatever, and then getting into leaving medicine and getting into movies and stuff? Is that like is that the goal process? I don't know. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have that in mind there. I love being on stage, and I do love doing like other speaking events as a psychiatrist, kind of bringing things into awareness, not necessarily telling jokes. Obviously, I do throw in jokes because that's just the nature of what I'm doing and who I am with that. But like speaking at like NAMI events and other things like that. And so, if I was ever to kind of like parlay out of that, I think it would be kind of speaking in general, whether that's just comedic or not, it would be tough to say. But yeah, I don't really see myself being in movies, nor can I like fit in the back of a trunk like Ken Jung and pop it out. Yeah. So but I actually almost took a job at the Kaiser he used to work, and I think
Yeah,
where his
Woodland
wife
Hills.
still works. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. What's funny is my mother-in-law works at that Kaiser, and
Does she really?
she knew Ken, so
That's
they had
wild.
interaction when he was a doctor there and stuff. And then when he left, he was nice to everybody and stuff. So that right there made me a fan of him, anyways. So it's pretty awesome that he could parlay like a little role in a movie into like a great career, and now he's been in so much other stuff. I think Community probably helped the most out of anything, but like definitely The Hangover was a big like stepping
Y-
stone.
Yeah, it was The Hangover. He did such a great bit part, and it was perfect for him. And then I think Community, yeah, he was able to just explore that space in with like probably free reign. My guess is based on what I've heard about how that show will work with that. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Now, what are your goals as a comedian? Like, do you have like are you trying to become a full time comedian, or do you like that you're a doctor and then you're a little bit of a comedian? Like, do you like that mix of a lifestyle? Well, what's kind of your goal there? Because I know that's a lot of comedians will go, oh, I want to eventually be a full time comedian. I want to travel. I want to do whatever, and I only want to be a comedian. I find myself that I actually am not gonna don't want to go down that path. I thought I wanted to go down that path. I actually prefer writing comedy. I love stand up, but I love the idea of building a world in my head and putting it onto a page and then other people can see it. So that for me has been kind of the move this last year. And also I love talking and teaching comedy. Like I found that I
Yeah.
love being in this world of like I'm a history nerd. I like research. I like this stuff and I want to share that. That's where more of my stuff has gone. But where are you thinking?
Yeah. You know, I'm still not quite sure. I think I would love to really continue to build my act, continue to just mine all aspects of my life. And I think that's something that's really therapeutic for me. It makes me a better doctor. Um, I wish I had more time to do it. And I wish I had more time to just like be more full time in that way. And I think that would be really awesome. You know, I the traveling, I think, is kind of that biggest barrier in terms of kind of where I balk with that a little bit because right now I got a 3-year-old and a 3-month old. And
Yeah.
so the idea of kind of traveling with that is a little bit more. But yeah, I would love to have it be much more of a full-time part of my life. Yeah. And it's definitely taken more of that there. I've been like much more intentional about just having that be day in, day out, no matter what it is. I'm doing some comedy, writing, shooting videos, clips, get into mics, doing those things. But yeah, I think I would love to envision a life that's more 50-50. I think would be kind of that way that I would imagine that. Yeah. Yeah. But I do love still practicing medicine. And I think being a doctor makes me a better comic, and being a comic certainly makes me a better doctor for sure.
I like that. That's a unique perspective because yeah, wow. Being a doctor makes you a better comic. Being a comic makes you better. That's man, that's deep. Okay, you're way smarter than me. Everyone you've found that the smartest person. It's
No,
definitely Sam Silverman.
there are plenty of dumb doctors out there, and I certainly could I could be one of them. Yeah, I'm not
I
smart enough to know my own brain that well.
I don't think so. So I can never remember this. It's psychologists can't prescribe drugs and psychiatrists can prescribe drugs. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I did go to medical school. Exactly. Yeah. So went to medical school. I can prescribe drugs. That's a lot of what I do, and obviously I do a lot of therapy and I have people I see who I don't have medicate on medication, but yeah, because there is such a need in psychiatry. I mean, my wait list is disgusting. I don't even want to talk about it. And I
Oh,
take insurance,
wow.
but it's yeah, I'm writing a lot of prescriptions for sure for all
Are
sorts
you
of stuff.
are you your own? Do you like run your own thing, or you work with like
I
in for like Kaiser or somebody like that or something like that, or do you run your own?
I work with a group. I'm not going to call them out here
No, no, no,
necessarily,
it's fine. You don't have to.
but yeah, but I do work with I work with a few different psychiatrists and then a larger multi-specialty group, and so which is nice. I like that because I'm not in charge of my own billing. I can take insurance. I can practice medicine the way I want to, which is awesome. I'm really
That's
lucky.
that's awesome. Now I've always wondered this, and I wonder if it's true or not. Do you think that in order to be a comedian, you have to have something wrong with you? Now, I'm not asking, you don't really have to give your professional opinion here, but I hear people say good comedians come from trauma. Good comedians come from bad things happening in their life and they turn that pain into laughter. Do you find that that's necessarily true? Or can someone be a normal, quote unquote, normal person? Not that there is a normal person, but like not have suffered like loss and tragedy and terrible lifestyle and still be able to be a comedian? Do you find that like I don't think Jerry Seinfeld has experienced any of that stuff. As far as I know, he kind of came from like upper middle class and never had to really worry about stuff and just kind of did it. So it seems like that should be okay. But I find that a lot of comedians fall into this trap of thinking, oh, I had this horrible life. So now this is my therapy. Stage is my therapy. Do you find that to be true or do you find that to be unnerving
I
or like, what's your perspective?
I I would say more on the side of unnerving. I do think a ton of people in comedy have mental illness, and I do think it's a really great way to kind of work through that process, that be open and honest about that. I also think there are a lot of great comedians that don't necessarily. I think you need to have good self-awareness if you're
Oh,
going to be a comic. I think that's the biggest thing. Not necessarily to practice good self-awareness or act accordingly out of that, but to be aware of yourself. Like you're talking about mine in your own life. And so if that's mental illness, if that's whatever else in your day-to-day life with kids and all those things, I think that's important. I think people with mental illness are e it's easier for them to find the complaints and confessions when we know comedy is so much about that. And I think it's also easier often to have complaints and confessions that others can relate to because there are people who are looking to connect and feel heard and feel seen and have that community with their own struggles through mental illness. And so I do think comedy is a really good vehicle for that, but I don't think that's the only thing it needs to be there. Yeah.
I like that. That's a good answer because I hate when I hear that or I see it on Reddit or on the internet where they go, "Oh well, if you didn't have a terrible life, you're never going to be a good comedian." I'm like, "Geez, that is a dark way to look at comedy, man."
It is, and I think that's the case for a lot of people. I do think that there's a much greater percentage of people at open mics and kind of like getting out there and starting who may do it for a couple years, not necessarily stick around, who do have that and could and can be decent even if they do eventually leave that process there. But I think you look at a lot of the top people, yeah, we can probably evaluate and say, hey, there's something not quite right with that person, but isn't necessarily that mental illness bringing that out there. No, yeah, not everything quirky is pathological too. That's the
Yeah,
other thing.
no, that's totally true. Now, I why did you go into psychiatry? What was the reason behind that? Because we've only come into an age of discussing mental health in probably the last 10 years or so. I know growing up in the 80s and 90s, being 80s and 90s kid, like you were either a normal person or you're just insane and people avoided you. There was no kind of in between of like, hey, maybe this person has, a chemical imbalance or maybe they have something else going on in their life and we should talk to them about it. There was no suicide awareness. Sorry if it's bothering anyone with that word, but there was none of this stuff, no mental health awareness. And now I see it everywhere and it's more prevalent. did that influence you becoming a psychiatrist? Did you have interest in that? And then what do you think we can do as comedians to even assist in mental health awareness, or even mental health as a whole?
Yeah, great question. So, I think more, not necessarily like stigma and all those things, but I think I had a reductive idea of what psychiatrists could do before I thought about being a psychiatrist. When I was at medical school, I kind of entering, I was like, okay, well, therapists and psychologists can do therapy, non-pharmacological process. All these other doctors can do the pharmacological stuff. So why do we need this person? And you very quickly, as you learn more about medicine, know that it's just so vast of a field and so many different things that we just don't realize and understand. Um, and so I was open to it more. And then I tell jokes about me going into psychiatry because of my own mental illness. That's not the case, but that is a lie. Everything else I say is the truth, though, which is interesting. But what I really said is, or what I really had is, I was doing all these rotations through like family medicine, pediatrics, OB-GYN, and I felt myself drawn to the mental health related aspects of that in a variety of different ways, whether it was like getting somebody to be able to take their diabetes and hypertension medication, be adherent to that, seeing that there's a tremendous amount of psychosocial and psychological processes that are barriers to that type of treatment and adherence to like opiate withdrawal while delivering babies in a heroin addict, using methadone, Suboxone, trying to, have as little neonatal withdrawal as possible or whatever else the case may be. And so by the time I got into my psychiatry rotation, I was already kind of thinking, hey, maybe I want to do this. And it sealed the deal immediately after. I was like, yeah, this is totally up my alley. I totally dig this. And there's so much more there than I thought. Yeah.
Wow,
So
that's awesome.
yeah, it was pretty awesome with that. As far as kind of like the idea of how can I think comics do a really good job of destigmatizing mental illness. And I think that's probably a lot of why there is that association too between comics and mental illness and that need to, because a lot of the people who are really dressing themselves down and saying, hey, this is me and I'm dealing with this are comics, or people who are saying things from a comedic lens, even if they're not on stage necessarily. And I think that's a really great thing. I think humor is a really good coping mechanism. It is a healthy coping mechanism. And so I think it's just really wonderful to be able to see that. And I think the other thing too is even if there aren't the non-sociopathic comics, let's say that people who
Yeah,
are not evil people, there are a lot of people who don't have mental illness who really then support the comics that do struggle with that. And so I think that community is a really wonderful thing. And so I think we already do a pretty decent job of that, to be honest. I think it's the rest of the world that needs to shape up, not the jokesters.
yeah, I like that. That's good. I always try to be aware of things I say. I don't want to ever say anything that will upset somebody. So I'm very aware about jokes that I tell or words that I say. And I try to be really thoughtful of that. I wanted to do a whole set about my childhood. It's pretty dark though. Like
Yeah.
my childhood is pretty dark. My mom was
Yeah.
married a bunch of times. We had physical, mental abuse and stuff in our family, and things happened. And I want to do a set as I was writing jokes about it to like get it out and whatever. My wife was like, I don't think you can say this on stage yet. I don't think you're ready. One, I don't think you're ready. And two, I don't think you're ready to say it to somebody else on stage where they will find it funny. They will instead find it very sad. And you will not get the reaction that you want. But I was trying to write that for me being so this is probably part of it. Being in the military, dark humor
Yeah.
is a normal coping mechanism, right? So
Totally.
um, a lot of my humor before the military was silly, jokey, like dude bro kind of humor, right? Like that kind of
Right.
got, you know, whatever. Military got very dark. I have a lot of dark humor and stuff. And so joke about things that most people go, dude, you can't joke about that, right? And then now that I'm out of the military, I still have a little bit of that left. And now I'm a dad. So now I have dude bro humor, military dark humor, and then now dad humor and put that all together.
Yeah.
It's a very weird combination sometimes where I'll say things
Yeah.
and my daughters will go, you can't say that. And I'm like, why not? Like, not
I
supposed to
yeah,
say stuff like that. Like, oh, okay.
totally. Yeah, it it's tough with that. I think it is always the idea of like you being ready to be able to say those things. But I do think that if you're vulnerable and you are ready to say those things, coming of a place of authenticity, I think you can provide levity in that darkness. And I do think that that's super important,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's about you being ready to be able to say those things. And that's when you really get that audience buy-in, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's worth doing it. Yeah, if nothing else, to right, like you said, do it for yourself, say it, get it out there, and then eventually you may be ready if you're doing that more. Maybe that, like we all know, our first draft is usually pretty terrible with
Yep.
those types of things, but it can develop and grow for sure.
I think for sure I will end up doing it. I don't think it'll be anything I do in the next few years. I think it'll be later on. I have a friend of mine, Glenn Tickle, who's also been on the podcast, who did a whole special called Good Grief about the death of his brother and stuff. And so I think I'm going to take from what he did there and probably work with him a little bit on it and say, hey, Glenn, how can I make this so it's not as depressing and make it more fun? Because that's the hard part I have is like,
Yeah.
we'll laugh at dark stuff, but a lot of people will go, they'll pull back and go, that's too dark, bro. You can't laugh at stuff like that. Like
Yeah.
my father-in-law's birthday is on 9/11. It's really his birthday.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'm like, we should just get a cake that's just two towers, right? And that's not
Right.
funny. That's not funny to my wife. She doesn't think it's hilarious. My father-in-law has laughed at it a few times,
Yeah.
and they're like, that's not funny. And I'm like, but it is funny because that's his birthday. I realize that the worst tragedy in American history, besides Pearl Harbor, happened on 9/11. I 100%
Yeah.
get it. But we should also take a minute to go, we can't let them win by being like, oh, we can never talk about it. Like if you never talk about something, then you never get past it. Now there are
Yeah.
joke things you can't joke about, obviously, but I don't feel like that. Like,
No, I think the idea of like when you break it down to that complaint, the idea that it's weird having your birthday, these happy, special, ideally, day on one of the worst days ever, the day that people most associate in terms of just numbers in
yeah,
those things more than anything else. It's weird. There's some weirdness to that, and I think there's then humor that can come from that for sure. Yeah.
yeah. I always feel bad for him because it's always like it's a weird day for us to go out and celebrate. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
if we went out to a place and we're like, we're celebrating today, and they're like, it's 9/11, right? And you're like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah, but it's his birthday. And it's like, maybe don't do that. And like that sucks for him. I always feel bad. I'm like, that's you can never now fully celebrate your birthday because it feels wrong.
Yeah.
It feels like you're doing something bad, even though you're not. You were born way before the actual 9/11, and that's not fair to you. So
Yeah. I mean, there's so many kids that hate their birthdays just because something awful happens. Usually it's their parents doing something awful to them on their
yeah.
birthdays, but like in this case it was terrorists and
Yeah.
not necessarily to him. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
exactly. I'm like, man, that is the worst day to wake up like wake up to on your birthday for sure. Like,
yeah.
poor
Oh.
poor guy. But I mean, he takes a while. He also does therapy. He works for
Oh, nice.
um the Child Protective Services. So he works with a lot of
Oh,
like this other stuff. So I have respect
yeah.
for therapists and psychiatrists. That is something that I don't have the patience for. Like, I do not have the patience to deal with that stuff. It would make me very upset, especially dealing with children or anything like that that was had to deal with like abuse or neglect or harm or whatever. I don't know if that's all the stuff he doesn't really talk about it, but I know that like when I was a kid, see, at least from what I know from like child protective services and those kinds, is dealing with like kids that are like harmed or hurt or
Yeah.
whatever. I don't think I'd have the capability to not cause harm to the person who harmed the child, if that makes sense. Like, I think I
Yeah.
might go too far on that side.
No, I think that's a bit like you have to in mental health, and I think CPS is such a good example of this in particular is the idea of you can only do so much. And being able to both like put your best foot forward and understand too that there are limitations to what you can do, it's a really hard thing to juggle. You feel helpless a lot of the time. And yeah, that anger will then come out,
Yeah.
obviously.
For
Yeah.
me, it would come out in a very bad way because I don't like bullies. I don't like people harming kids. Like,
Yep.
I grew up you guys probably know this, but I grew up in Texas, so there's a lot of like women and children respect. That's how I always grew up. Like, you
Yeah.
look out for women, you look out for children. Those are the two things as a human man You look out for those people who are weaker than you, who are cannot protect themselves, who need safety, who need security, who are in danger. So I'm
Yeah.
the person that maybe at if you're at the grocery store and I see like a little old lady struggling to get her groceries, I might be like, "Ma'am, can I help you?" Now that
Yep.
terrifies people for some reason out here in California, but when I was growing up in Texas, like they were very much like, "Oh yes, please," But here
Yeah.
people are like getting out their pepper spray, and I'm like, "No, I'm just trying to help. Like I don't want to," but
Yeah.
so
Yeah. No, I think that's the right way to go about it. I think, yeah, it is such a, it absolutely is. And yeah, it's tough when you literally cannot help somebody with some of those things because, yeah, there are going to be places in like with CPS, for instance, where you clearly know something is not a good situation. You're doing all you can and you're still not removing somebody from that situation, fixing it, extricating, whatever the case is. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's awful.
It's terribly sad. But let's end on a positive note. What is your favorite place to perform in Santa Barbara? Where can people find you, and where can they watch more of your stand up or be able to see when they can see you out performing?
Yeah, the my favorite place to perform in Santa Barbara, I mean I love Sam's shows and play and performing on the Bear Cave. And so Bear
Yeah.
Cave Comedy, she does a lot of good stuff. And her the favorite my favorite place I like to go do shows there is the cruisery, unbearable, wine therapy. That is all one place. I want to be
Wow.
pretty clear. It's like all like right in the same thing. I don't know exactly how it works there, but they have these awesome things out back, patio, and it's called wine therapy out back there, which I find really funny because that's a lot of the therapy my patients will use when they're starting out. And so it's yeah, it's pretty good, but it's a great venue there. Instagram is my number one social media for sure. If you follow me on TikTok, I'm just going to repost Instagram stuff because I'm fall right in that millennial age range. So that's TikTok's not for me. But and then YouTube too. But Sam Silverman comedy, I believe, is my Instagram handle. Let's see here. I That's how much I follow this stuff. Yeah, Sam Silverman comedy. You can see that I post, different shows I'm doing, clips, other stuff, and stuff that I'm trying out and seeing if it flops there. So, give me that feedback, Paul Moonjim style.
There you go. I found out that I am what is considered. I guess it's a small window called Zennial. It's from 77 to I think
Hmm.
it's 83 or whatever because that's when the
Yeah,
original Star Wars trilogy came out. So I'm a
that makes
Zennial because
sense.
I don't
Yeah.
really fall into Gen X, but I have a lot of traits of them. And I don't really fall into millennial stuff, but I have some traits of them. So this kind of Zennial movement is where I live. I actually want to
I could
do
see that.
a comedy special titled Zennial. Like I want to talk
I think you
about
should.
that weird thing and like how Star Wars shaped most of my life as a child. Like it really did, and to adulthood as well. And that's like something that is very zennial and not really millennial and Gen X on that way. So that's probably something for me.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think it's like, it's a beautiful middle ground. You're not as hardened as the Gen Xers, and you're not as soft as the millennials. It's kind of this and Star Wars encapsulates that so beautifully. So
Yeah,
I love that. Yeah.
it is. I always tell my kids, I'm like, you don't understand. Like, I'm the kid that grew up like with a rotary TV and like rabbit ears and moved to the internet with eBay and going online and AOL and all the stuff. Going from literally from never seeing the internet to dial up on the internet to wireless internet all in my lifetime. And no generation has done that before. I'm like, and you
Yeah.
have no idea because you were born into the world where there was wireless internet, where all
It's
these things already
insane.
existed. Yeah, I'm like, they don't even get it. My kids go, you because I we were watching something and it made somebody in their startup video on like YouTube or something
They did the
had
click,
this.
click, click.
No, they had the sound from the dial-up modem.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh my God. I used
And
to hate it.
I started to get like shivers. I was like, I hope nobody picks up the phone. Like that was my first
Right.
thought.
That's exactly right. Oh my God, I so remember that. Yeah. Yeah, because even though I'm more in that millennial, I had the same thing. Yeah, click, 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 a turnstile for the TV all the way up through that dial up. Yeah, I definitely didn't have wireless until well after I left for college, and yeah, we had landlines in the dorm rooms still.
Yeah,
We would still call each other. Yeah, they gave us the Ethernet cables at the start of college. I thought that was really funny.
yeah,
So, yeah, weird, definitely
yeah. You
different.
laptops you used to have to plug the Ethernet into your laptop. There was
Yeah.
no Wi-Fi yet. We started with that,
Nope.
and now everything's Wi-Fi. If you ask somebody like, "Hey, do you have an Ethernet port?" They'll look at you like, "What in the heck are you talking about?" And you're like,
I know.
"Dude, that was only a small window. There wasn't a lot of that, so it's super weird."
So weird. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Sam, for being on the podcast. You guys, I'll put
Thanks for having me.
all the links in the show notes for. Yeah, of course. I'll put all the links in the show notes for Sam, so you guys can go check out his stuff. He has great stuff. You got to go watch it. He's very smart, very talented. And I am so glad I finally got to meet you. We kind of have like been in
Likewise.
the same like universe rotating around each other and never like connecting. And then we connected. It was just amazing. And it was funny because it felt like we had already known each other.
Mhm.
That's the crazy part. It's like I already felt like I knew you. You already felt like you knew me. And I was like, all right, well, this is great. You're
It's
easily getting along.
perfect. Comics helping comics, loving comedy. Yeah,
That's
awesome.
That's it. I can't say anything better than that. Thank you guys so much for listening. Please like, subscribe. Please go check it out. Don't forget, at the beginning of the year, there will be a second podcast that comes out. That'll come out on Thursdays. So I'm prepping you for that. So you know, so regular podcast, King Comedy Podcast, normal one, Tuesdays, and then the extra one that you have to sign up for and subscribe. It will be cost money. I've had people actually tell me I was pitching too low of a price. I still don't know what I'm going to do. So just so you guys know, but you will have to subscribe for that. And that's going to walk you through making money in comedy and comedy writing and stuff. And that will be very guided. There will be some one-on-one interviews, all that kind of stuff. So get ready for that. Get ready for 2024. If you haven't been reviewing yourself and getting yourself ready and coming up with a plan for 2024, go listen to that episode because we'll do that. And then we'll do a check-in at the beginning of the year and my plan for 2024 and hopefully inspire you guys for 2024. And setting goals, right? Setting goals is important. Is that right, Sam?
Oh, it's huge, and you may come short of them, but as long as you're trying and you're pushing that's where the success is, in my opinion.
No, that's right. I mean, and that's the thing. I think that's the saying is shoot for the stars, and if you land on the moon, you just still did something amazing. Something like
Yeah, yeah.
maybe I heard that.
No, I think that's right, except in astronomy class. That's right.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. Have a good one. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.